3 months after our wedding, Shinwon took a concubine. She was gentle and quiet, so much like my cousin who lived far away in the capital. He married her with the same ceremony reserved for a legitimate wife, and gifted her fine horses and carriages, things he never gave me. Even when the enemy launched a surprise attack, he chose to save her without a moment's hesitation. All he left me with were the words, "I'm sorry. Yao Yao is carrying my child." They say he finally regretted it after I died. He searched through the burial grounds with his bare hands, looking for my body. But I wasn't dead. Xiejio had already found me and taken me in, using both sweet words and tricks. "It's fine if you've lost your memory. Just remember, I'm your husband now." I dreamed again. In the dream, it was the day the Chang army launched a surprise assault and Shenwon was defeated. Amid deafening battle cries, he charged in on horseback, shielding his concubine, Su Yao Yao, in his arms. Yao Yao is delicate and defenseless. She's also carrying my child. You're different, Zhongli. You've trained in martial arts since childhood. Even without me, you can survive. Just as they mounted the horse, an arrow whistled through the air and pierced my shoulder from behind. The moment it tore through my flesh, everything became frighteningly clear. I heard Su Yao Yao crying in his arms, and I saw Shenwon look back at me from his saddle. But only for a moment. Then he looked away and rode off. The Chang army broke into the city, and their leader ordered that no one be spared. One of their soldiers saw that I was still breathing and slashed at my neck with his blade. But his aim was off. The blade landed across my face instead. Blood blurred my vision in a wash of crimson. The searing pain jolted me awake. The images of arrows and blades in the dream were still vivid. Even the ache from that old wound sent a wave of dread through me. I clutched my chest, my heart racing wildly. As I gasped for breath, a knock came at the door. "Madam, there's a guest. Master invites you to the flower hall." The maid's voice came muffled through the door panel. Those 2 words, "Madam," suddenly calmed the chaos in my chest. That's right. The attack on Liangzhou by the Chang army happened 3 years ago. I had long since changed my name and identity. I was no longer Zhongli. I was now Xiejio's wife, Songyu. Xiejio liked hosting guests. He also liked having me sit beside him at the table. He enjoyed hearing people flatter us, calling us a perfect match, made for each other. And he especially liked hearing others call me Madam Xie. He enjoyed it, and so did I. I always went along with him. But today, when I heard him say warmly from the flower hall, "My wife is, of course, the best in the world. Even her apricot wine is worth more than gold," I was still a little surprised. When he saw me approach, his eyes lit up and he stood to greet me. "Wife, come, let me introduce you. This is an old comrade of mine from the battlefield. Brother Shin, this is the wife I mentioned to you." His overly warm tone and the way he addressed him, Brother Shin, made my heart skip a beat. A strange unease crept up inside me. Before I could think more, there was a soft clink. Someone dropped their wine cup. I turned toward the sound and saw the man opposite us frozen, his body stiff, eyes wide in disbelief. "Ali." His lips moved, and his voice was barely a whisper. The moment I recognized his face, my breath caught. Because standing there was none other than Shinwon, the husband who abandoned me 3 years ago to save his concubine. My fingers clenched slightly. The small pain brought my thoughts back into place and steadied my emotions. Xiejio was smiling, as if he hadn't noticed Shinwon's loss of composure. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. It was tense and uneasy. "Wife, Brother Shin has just arrived in Yunzhou. He heard your apricot wine is famous and would like to try a jug. Do we still have any left?" His tone was even sweeter than usual, and his way of calling me wife more deliberate. I couldn't help but sigh softly. What else wasn't obvious? Xiejio was testing me, testing whether I had truly lost my memory, and whether I still had feelings for Shinwon. I did once care for Shinwon. We met when we were young. I heard he loved martial arts, so I knelt outside my grandfather's study all night to beg him to teach Shin spear techniques. I knew the battlefield was cruel and injuries were common. So rain or shine, I crossed half of Liangzhou to learn medicine from the best doctor in the city. Back then, Shun would sneak me out of the city to see the desert beyond. And every year, just before my birthday, he would bring wine, climb over the wall, and celebrate with me. I thought we shared the same feelings. But then my cousin Chu Yu returned to Liangzhou for a visit. That's when I realized. When Shun Wenin looked at her, his eyes held a gentleness I had never seen. He had the patience to wait in line all day just to buy her a pastry from a hidden alley shop. Even when horse bandits kidnapped both me and Chu Yu, and he could only save one of us, he didn't hesitate to say, "Let Chu Yu go." He did save her. And out of guilt, he promised my grandfather he would marry me. 10 miles of wedding procession. A grand bridal sedan. Everyone in Liangzhou envied our wedding. But neither of us really had a choice. I had been kidnapped, my reputation ruined. No one else would marry me but him. He hated me for it, never once touched me. On our wedding night, he sat in silence, drinking alone until dawn. Less than 3 months into our marriage, he took in a concubine who looked exactly like Chu Yu. And when danger struck, once again, he chose to abandon me for her. That year, when Yan forces launched a surprise attack and broke through Lingxi Pass, my grandfather mobilized troops without imperial orders. A capital offense. 3 months after his death, the Chang army attacked Liangzhou. Shun Wenin was defeated and fled with his concubine, Su Yao Yao. I was gravely injured, on the verge of death. My life flashed before my eyes like a lantern carousel. And in that moment, I couldn't help but think. Shun Wenin really did forget. He forgot that after he abandoned me to save Chu Yu, I had fought desperately to defend my dignity, taking multiple knife wounds. By the time my grandfather arrived with reinforcements to save me, both of my hands had been crippled. From that day on, I was no longer able to lift a sword. If left alone, I would have died. I thought for sure I was going to die. But I didn't. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Xiejio. His brows were tightly furrowed, and the worry in his gaze was overwhelming. "How are you feeling? Does the wound hurt? Are there any other discomforts?" He fired off a string of questions like a rapid volley. Without waiting for my reply, he turned and grabbed the collar of the old physician. "Why isn't she speaking? Why does she look at me like I'm a stranger? Are you even a real doctor?" The old man, dizzy from being shaken, could only offer a muddled explanation. "She has a head injury. The blood clot might have affected her brain and caused memory loss. But it's rare. She's only just woken up. We'll need to observe her for a few days." But Xiejio didn't seem to hear the second half. His slightly upturned eyes suddenly lit up with joy. He rushed to my side, knelt beside the bed, and spoke solemnly, coaxing me gently. "Do you still remember me? I'm your husband, Xiejio." I hadn't lost my memory. I remembered that he was Xiejio, the 6th son of the late emperor. I remembered that he had once defended Liangzhou alongside my grandfather. I remembered that after the Yan army broke through Lingxi Pass, my grandfather dispatched troops without orders and was executed. Xiejio was implicated and demoted to commoner status, then exiled to Yunzhou. I also remembered that we barely knew each other. We had only met a few times. The last time was the night before my wedding. He had climbed over the Zhong family wall and stood outside my window, carefully calling out, "Miss Zhong, you're getting married tomorrow. I bought your favorite apricot wine." That wine had been an unexpected gift. That word, husband, was even more startling. I didn't know when his feelings for me had begun. Nor did I know that the boy who always looked away whenever we met, afraid to meet my eyes, was capable of such an earnest, vivid expression. At first, I wanted to explain, but when I saw the seriousness in his face, met his burning gaze, the words got stuck in my throat. So be it. He had saved my life. If he didn't mind my ruined self, then I would spend the rest of my days by his side. That was what I thought at the time. So I whispered, "Yes, I remember. You're my husband, Xiejio." I never found out how Xiejio left Yunzhou and crossed hundreds of miles to save me in Liangzhou. I had no strength to wonder how he snatched me from the jaws of death. I only knew that he invited the best doctor in Yunzhou to treat my injuries, and found a nearly lost secret remedy to heal the wound on my face. Facial treatment was agonizing. They had to carve away the necrotic flesh and graft new skin from a recently deceased person. When the wound finally healed, I no longer looked like my old self. Siegio was delighted. He said, "Ayu, a new face means a new life. From now on, just be who you are.
Don't worry about me.
Until the day you truly accept me, I'll wait." And he meant it. Though he called me his wife, he never overstepped. But whenever he invited guests, he always brought me along, just to hear them call me Madame Xia. He liked hearing people say we were a perfect match. But perhaps because I never showed affection, he was never at ease. Over these 3 years during banquets with others, he would often, intentionally or not, bring up Shen Wenin's name. He would talk about how, after the chaos in Liangzhou ended, Shen Wenin spent 3 days and nights searching through the mass graves outside the city for his wife's corpse. He would say that after his wife died, Shen Wenin fell gravely ill and was bedridden for 3 months, utterly heartbroken. Sometimes he would even ask me, nervously, "Ayu, what do you think? If his wife were still alive and knew how deeply he grieved, would she forgive him? Would she go back to him?" Whenever he asked such things, he never dared meet my eyes. Just like now. Cautious, probing. "Madam, do we still have any of that apricot wine to share with Brother Shen?" That word, "madam," snapped Shen Wenin out of his daze. "Madam? Might I ask your name? Where you live? How old you are?" He didn't look at Siegio. His gaze was locked on me, unwavering. His expression was clouded and tense. The way he said "madam" was tight and biting. I was caught off guard. Shen Wenin had always been composed and restrained, never showing his emotions. It was the first time I'd seen him this shaken. He clutched his wine cup tightly, his voice strained, as if trying to find a flaw in my expression. "You look so much like my late wife. Have you heard of her? She was from the Zhong family of Liangzhou. Her name was Zhongli." The moment the words Zhongli left his mouth, the smile on Siegio's face wavered. He was about to speak, but I gently squeezed his hand to hold him back. "I've heard of your late wife's name, of course. There are many in this world who resemble each other. It must be fate that I happen to resemble your lady wife, don't you think, my dear husband?" At that, Shen Wenin's expression instantly darkened, but I acted as if I didn't see it. I turned to Siegio, who had frozen at the word husband, his eyes gradually lighting up with joy, and let out a quiet sigh with a faint smile, a reply with double meaning. "My dear, your memory's been worse than ever lately. Have you already forgotten? You drank up the rest of that apricot wine in a whim a few days ago. There's not a drop left." Siegio was overjoyed. So happy, in fact, that he started stammering a little when he spoke. "Why, yes, look at me. How could I forget something like that? Brother Shen, I truly apologize." His smile was bright as the sun. In contrast, Shen Wenin across from us looked utterly grim. His eyes turned sharp, sweeping back and forth between Siegio and me. Only after a long pause did he finally look away. He forced a smile back onto his face. "No matter. Another time, perhaps." Clearly unwilling to stay longer, he stood up with a darkened expression and quickly took his leave. Siegio offered a few polite words to see him off, but without much sincerity. Only after the man had left did he turn back to look at me again, eyes brimming with hope. "Ayu, just now, what did you call me?" I had wanted to follow his lead, to keep pretending I'd lost my memory, to keep enjoying his affection. But seeing that hopeful look in his eyes, thinking of how for 3 years he had been walking on eggshells, uncertain and anxious, I suddenly realized how unfair it was to him. If he'd gone as far as to invite Shen Wenin into the manor to test me, he must already be deeply suspicious. Why not take the chance and tell the truth? I thought. After a brief moment of consideration, I carefully chose my words. "Siegio, actually, I never lost my memory. I was thinking, why don't we get married? That way I can call you husband openly and proudly." I had thought he'd be happy if I proposed marriage. But to my surprise, the moment the words left my lips, he froze. The color slowly drained from his face. You never lost your memory? I didn't answer. I simply gave a small, slow shake of my head. His pupils contracted slightly. Then suddenly, he curved his lips into a smile. He was clearly smiling, but his voice trembled uncontrollably. If you remembered everything, why didn't you expose me all this time? Why go along with pretending to be my wife for so long? Why agree to marry me now? Is it because I saved you, and you feel grateful? He paused. Something seemed to flash through his eyes, a flicker of pain. And in the blink of an eye, his face grew even paler. But the smile on his lips didn't fade. If anything, it grew brighter. Ayu, you don't have to. If it's out of gratitude, or if today's encounter with Shun Wunin stirred up other feelings, then I'd rather just stay by your side like this. His thoughts were jumping so erratically, I couldn't keep up. For a moment, I was stunned speechless. By the time I'd collected myself and found the words to explain, Xiejio suddenly tossed out, "Oh no, I completely forgot today is the full-month banquet for Li Sanlang's newborn son. I need to bring a gift." And just like that, he fled. I watched his retreating figure rush away, not stopping even when I called after him. A wave of sourness rose in my chest. Xiejio, he really is a fool. He couldn't even come up with a better excuse. That full-month banquet for Li Sanlang's son? It was yesterday, and I went with him. Xiejio was avoiding me. I thought surely he'd return home that night. Once he came back, I'd properly explain everything. Tell him that yes, at first I stayed because I was grateful. But now, my wish to marry him had nothing to do with that. It was because I loved his smile, loved being by his side. But I waited until just before midnight, and he never showed. Instead, someone from the Li residence came. Master Xie drank too much. He's crying and won't let anyone near him. My lord had no choice but to let him rest in the guest room for the night. Xiejio holds his liquor well. I didn't believe he could have gotten so drunk he'd start sobbing. I wanted to go fetch him myself. But the Li family servant insisted again and again that he had already gone to sleep. So I gave up for now and decided I'd go pick him up in the morning. But just as I stepped out of the house at dawn, I ran into someone I hadn't expected. Madame Xie. The woman's smile was soft, her voice like an aureole in spring. I'm Su Yao Yao, a concubine of the Shun household. I attended the banquet at your manor yesterday. I heard my husband praise your apricot wine, saying it's worth a fortune and tastes divine. So I took the liberty of coming here today to ask for the recipe. I hope Madam won't mind sharing it with me. Su Yao Yao, Shun Wunin's concubine. She stood right at the gates of Xie Manor, as if waiting for me on purpose, blocking my way, and inviting with a warm smile. I'm new to Yinzhou. I heard the breakfast at Shiyu Tea House is quite good. Why don't I host today and we can chat there? Her smile was still as gentle as before. It made me recall the days I spent with her in the Shun household's inner court. In the first few months after Shen Wenin took her in, rumors flew all over the city about how we were at odds. After all, we'd been married less than 3 months when he brought her in. He spent every night in her chambers, gave her jeweled hairpins, bangles, fine horses, and carriages. He pampered her excessively. Everyone in Liangzhou saw it. Even I, his lawful wife, had never received such treatment. But in truth, my relationship with her wasn't nearly as hostile as people said. When the Zhong family fell into disgrace, I suffered from nightmares every night. She would kneel and bow, step by step, to the temple outside the city, begging the gods for protective charms on my behalf. I, too, once secretly helped her find her long-lost mother who had been separated from her during the chaos. Shun Wenin did favor her, but he made her dress like Chu Yu, made her speak like Chu Yu. In her, he was looking for Chu Yu's shadow. Whenever he called her, he didn't say her name. He called her by Chu Yu's childhood nickname, Chi Chi. And she did, indeed, resemble my cousin. Gentle and well-mannered, educated and elegant. Even 3 years ago, when Shun Wunen shielded her in his arms during battle, she cried out helplessly in the chaos. My sister's hurt. Let me go. Help her. It was so much like Chuyu. Hard not to feel sympathy. Harder still to say no. In what world does a guest pay the bill? I replied. Inside the private room of Shiyu tea house. After sending the servants away, Su Yao Yao finally let her eyes well with tears. I heard the Prince of Qi, no, I mean Master Xie, loves his wife deeply. And I heard Madame brews an incredible apricot wine. That's when I realized the Madame Xie they spoke of must be you. I'm just so glad you're still alive. She had changed how she addressed me, but I wasn't surprised. Though my face was no longer what it once was. Those who knew me well could still recognize the resemblance. Her heartfelt concern moved me a little. And you? I asked softly. How have you been these years? I had assumed she was doing well. After all, I'd heard Shen Wunen had searched all over Dichu for famous physicians to treat the chronic illness she developed during their escape. But to my surprise, as soon as I finished asking, her smile faltered slightly. I've just been getting by. She didn't say more. Her tone was bitter and closed off. She quickly shifted the topic back to me. Let's not talk about that anymore. I came today because the general asked me yesterday to get the recipe for your apricot wine. Years ago, you created that recipe at the manor and used to brew it often. He suspects something now and wants to use it to confirm your identity. Her words made my heart tighten slightly. I instinctively took the cup of tea she handed me. By the time I realized something was wrong, the tea had already gone down my throat and settled in my stomach. I'd studied medicine for a while. Though not highly skilled, I was very familiar with battlefield anesthetics and narcotics. Just one sip was enough for me to know. It was a potent sedative. Why? The drug took effect quickly. I forced myself to stay conscious, but alongside disbelief, a faint and nameless sorrow rose in my chest. Sister, he used my mother's life to threaten me. I had no choice. But don't worry, he hasn't confirmed your identity yet. He's only suspicious and trying to test you. If you can just stall for time, I've already secretly sent someone to find Master Xie. He won't let anything happen to you. Her last sentence was barely audible. As she spoke, she suddenly leaned closer. There was a slight movement from her sleeve, as if she was slipping something to me. But I no longer had the strength to see what it was. In a matter of moments, I lost consciousness. I woke to the jolting of a carriage. As expected, my hands and feet were bound. The first person I saw upon opening my eyes was Shen Wunen, whom I had just seen yesterday. Ollie, you're awake? Seeing me open my eyes, he smiled warmly, even reached out to help me up. But when I flinched away, his hand halted, and his smile froze awkwardly on his face. I sat up, my tone cold. General Shen, may I ask why you've kidnapped me? He sighed and sat back down. No need to pretend. I know you, my Ollie. I know you've been resenting me all these years. Otherwise, why pretend to have amnesia, change your name and identity, and use Xiejio to provoke me? His self-righteous tone almost made me laugh, but I held it in. Su Yao Yao had said he wasn't yet certain of my identity. But the moment we met yesterday, I could tell he was already sure. Even so, I still didn't want to admit it. I especially didn't want anything more to do with him. I am Songyu, the eldest daughter of the Song family of Sichuan. My husband and I have been happily married for years. Everyone in Yunzhou knows this. General Shen, if you suspected me, surely you looked into it first? Songyu, truly, was the eldest daughter of the wealthy Song family of Sichuan. Afraid someone might question it, Xiejio had handled the identity papers with meticulous care. From her life history to her daily habits, everything matched mine. Even the Song couple had personally come to Yunzhou and affectionately called me daughter. There wasn't the slightest flaw in my registered identity. But clearly, Shen Wunen wasn't going to believe such a convenient cover story. He continued on, as if speaking only to himself. All these years, I never believed you were dead. I searched for you everywhere. I should have known. 3 years ago, when Xiejio left Yunzhou under the pretense of quelling bandits and disobeyed orders. I should have realized he did it for you. His brows furrowed slightly, gaze locked tightly on me. Ollie, I was wrong. I shouldn't have waited until I lost you to realize. You're the one I truly love. His voice trembled with emotion, his eyes swimming with sentiment. Longing, affection, but I didn't believe a single word. What surprised me more was that 3 years ago, I had barely any connection with Xiejio. Yet both Shen Wenin and Su Yao seemed completely certain of his feelings for me. Pushing the thought aside, I looked coldly at Shen Wenin, seated so near. General Shen, if you truly loved your late wife so deeply, perhaps you should save those words for the day you meet her in the underworld and tell her yourself. His eyes darkened. In the next instant, a flash of menace emerged. Before I could react, he suddenly leaned in. Ollie, if you won't admit it, does that mean you've really fallen for Xiejio? His question made me pause for a breath. Even that slight hesitation seemed to enrage him. His expression changed in a heartbeat, growing fierce and twisted. Do you know who first proposed deploying troops in the Battle of Lingxi Pass? It was him. That's why the Zhong family was wiped out. And have you ever wondered why the Chang army just happened to strike Liangzhou right after I left? And how he showed up immediately after to take you away? He hurled question after question, but gave me no time to answer. That's because that entire battle in Liangzhou was orchestrated by him, just so he could have you. His fists clenched tightly, his voice nearly grinding through his teeth, as if he truly believed I'd fall for that. True, when Lingxi Pass fell, 3 cities in the Central Plains were taken within 5 days. It was Xiejio who first suggested reinforcing the front. At the time, he said, if we wait for the imperial court to issue orders, the message may take days to reach us. How many people inside Lingxi Pass will die in that time? Liangzhou is the nearest to the pass. We must act now. Let me go. If the emperor holds anyone accountable afterward, I'll take full responsibility. I won't let the Zhong family suffer for this. But even without his suggestion, my grandfather would have made the same decision. On the night we left Liangzhou, my grandfather even had him knocked unconscious. When the emperor demanded punishment afterward, Xiejio tried to take the blame alone. But my grandfather knelt before him and said, Your Highness, my granddaughters are married now. The Zhong family has only me left. I have nothing to hold on to anymore. I'm too old. My bones won't last many more battles. But you're still young. You have strategy and courage. Great Chu doesn't lack royal sons. But it lacks a general like you, someone who truly cares for the people. If you live one more day, the people of Chu will be safe for one more day. That night, I stood outside the window and heard it all. I heard Xiejio cry, utterly broken. And I heard him promise my grandfather that for the rest of his life, he too would care for the people, just as my grandfather did. And now Shen Wenin, trying to drive a wedge, slandering Xiejio for colluding with the Chang army, orchestrating the Battle of Liangzhou. How laughable. Because I know, Xiejio would never. Ollie, you and I are husband and wife. Even if I didn't know my heart back then, I never meant to hurt you. Seeing me silent in thought, Shen Wenin seemed to believe I'd been convinced.
His voice softened.
Though I lost the battle 3 years ago and was demoted, I've since regained my post. I still live at the Shen Manor. If you're willing, we can go back to how things were. No, I'll treat you 1,000 times better than before. Ollie, give me a chance, will you? He changed his tone so fast. When he said those words, his eyes were filled once again with so-called deep affection. Had I heard this years ago, I might have been moved. But now, hearing it again, I could only laugh. And I didn't even bother hiding it. A soft snort slipped out. I wanted to mock him, to say that love, when it comes too late, is worth less than dirt. I wanted to tell him, I'm not a fool. I can tell whether someone truly regrets their actions, whether their feelings are real. But before I could say anything, we were interrupted by the coachman outside the curtain. General, someone's chasing us. Xiejio had caught up quickly. In just a moment, he and his men had forced the carriage to stop. Shun Wunen, let go of my wife, he shouted in fury. Even through the curtain, I could feel his rage. Shun Wunen's expression darkened. He lifted the curtain and stepped out, his voice sharp and cold like winter frost. Your wife? Xiejio. She's clearly my wife. Zhongli. There was a sudden silence outside. I didn't need to look to imagine the expression on Xiejio's face. Xiejio is good, decisive, straightforward. But whenever it has anything to do with me, he always becomes hesitant, overthinks everything. I knew he was probably overthinking again. I couldn't help but sigh softly. Husband, my hands and feet are tied, it hurts. Aren't you going to save me? I couldn't see either of their faces, but I heard Xiejio's voice suddenly rise. All right, I'm coming.
Clang.
The crisp clash of swords rang out outside. I didn't wait for Xiejio to rescue me. My fingers found the thing Su Yao Yao had slipped into my sleeve, a dagger. I cut through the ropes. And, the moment I jumped down from the carriage, Shun Wunen's coachman had already fled far away. He was shaking uncontrollably, not daring to even look in our direction. In the distance, the two men were locked in fierce combat, unable to break away. But their mouths didn't stop. Shun Wunen shouted, Xiejio, you took advantage of Ali's injury and amnesia to deceive her. What a despicable coward. Look around you. We're already past the Yunzhou border. You barely survived that last flogging. This time, you won't be so lucky. Xiejio fired back without backing down.
Ha.
She's my wife, Song Yu. If saving my wife means charging all the way to the capital, so be it. But you're just a pitiful bastard who can't stand to see others happy. While I live in harmony with my wife, you're left to guard an empty tomb, never to hear even a word of forgiveness. They were too caught up in their confrontation. Neither noticed me holding a dagger. Shun Wunen tried to speak again, but he had only uttered a "you" when he suddenly choked. The sword in his hand was knocked flying, but he didn't look at it. Instead, he slowly turned around, eyes wide in disbelief. Ollie, you're going to kill me? The dagger pierced his shoulder blade. Blood instantly soaked through his robes. With that single strike, I considered our debts paid in full. I thought as much. Then I stepped back, placing myself protectively in front of Xiejio. General Shun, you've got the wrong person. No one is allowed to hurt my husband. No one, absolutely no one. I didn't hesitate when I stabbed him, but after Shun Wunen left, clutching his wound, I looked down at my blood-stained hands, and they began to tremble uncontrollably. I've always been afraid of blood. That vivid red has haunted my dreams for 3 years, wrapping around me, suffocating me. Just like now, my breath quickened. Don't look. A warm hand covered my eyes. Xiejio's voice was soft, as reassuring as ever. Don't be scared. I'm here. He gently turned my shoulders, and for the first time in 3 years, he crossed the boundary and pulled me into his arms. Xiejio. My voice trembled, but he didn't answer. Instead, he leaned heavier and heavier against me, his hands gradually slipping downward. Ew, it hurts. His voice, soft and almost childlike, was something I had never heard from him before. Only then did I realize something was wrong. Just before he collapsed, I wrapped my arms around his waist, but what I touched was hot and wet. My heart clenched in terror. Xiejio, you're hurt. But the only answer I got was the faint rhythm of his breathing. Xiejio was seriously injured. Right after he finished whispering that it hurt, he passed out. A servant, who had arrived late, explained that on the way here, they'd been blocked by several groups sent by Shun Wunen. Xiejio, anxious and panicked, lost focus. And someone seized the chance to slash him from behind. He downplayed it when they told me, but I could imagine how harrowing it must have been. I knew the wound would be bad. Still, I wasn't prepared. When the doctor removed his clothes and revealed his back, I was stunned. His back was crisscrossed with old and new scars. And on his lower back, there was a large patch of discolored, scarred skin.
Dark red.
Hideous. And its size and shape was exactly like the grafted skin the doctor used on my face 3 years ago. Back then, when my facial wound had turned necrotic, they had no choice but to cut away the dead flesh and replace it with skin from a recently deceased girl. I hadn't wanted the treatment, but Siegio told me a young girl had just passed away outside the city, and that he had paid a large sum to convince her family to agree. He told me not to worry. I had never doubted him, but now, seeing that patch of skin, so starkly different from the rest of his wounded back, what else could I not understand? That must have been the last uninjured piece of skin on his back. But he gave it to me. My chest ached, my eyes burned, and I could no longer hold it in. My voice quivered as I spoke. Siegio, you really are such a fool. Fearing Siegio might fall into a feverish delirium, I stayed by his bedside the entire night. But when I awoke the next morning, I found myself lying on the bed, not knowing when I had fallen asleep. And it was Siegio, injured and unconscious just yesterday, who was now sitting at the bedside, holding a strand of my hair in his hand, enthusiastically braiding it. When he saw me open my eyes, he didn't stop what he was doing. Instead, he looked up and smiled, eyes curved into crescents. You're awake? He must have been very happy. His hands kept moving. The strand of hair he was braiding included both mine and his, tightly entwined. Whether intentional or not, his gaze never left that lock of hair.
He spoke softly.
Shunwonin said I took 100 lashes with the military staff. That's not true. Father pitied me and had the staff replaced with a whip. The ones who beat me were my own men. It didn't even hurt. When I first heard of the Chang army's unrest, I suspected they would attack Liangzhou. It wasn't that I hoped Shunwonin would abandon you. I was just scared, and I couldn't afford to take the gamble. His tone was steady and unhurried, yet it didn't allow me to interrupt. It sounded like a confession, as if he was finally laying bare everything he had kept hidden in his heart. When I found out you'd lost your memory, I can't describe how happy I was. I knew you liked Shunwonin. No, I should say that back then, the entire city of Liangzhou knew how much you liked him. But he left you. So, I thought, maybe it was time I selfishly fought for you. I did fight for you. But later I got scared. Scared you'd suddenly remember everything. Scared you'd fall under his spell again. I lived every day in fear. And so I couldn't help but test you again and again. He paused. His hands slowly stopped. His voice trembled. Ollie, I was wrong. I was the one who deceived you first. But when it mattered most, I only thought about saving myself. And even doubted you. Li Sanling was right. What's the point of overthinking everything? Whether it's gratitude or anything else. I should have held on to you. Kept you by my side no matter what. Ollie, the words you said, when you called me your husband and said you wanted to marry me, do they still count? That cautious, tentative tone of his. It was the same as always. I had so many things I wanted to say. I wanted to tell him. His father never liked him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stripped his mother's family of most of their military power after his death last year. I wanted to tell him. I never liked Shunwonin as deeply as he thought. I wanted to say, he didn't do anything wrong. It was me. I was the one who hid the truth about my memory loss. I was the one who let him wait, without reassurance. I even wanted to tell him, if anything like this ever happened again, he shouldn't come after me. I don't want to see him get hurt. I have legs. I can walk back on my own. But my heart was pounding. My chest felt sore and soft. And facing his nervous, uncertain eyes, I couldn't say a single word. A thought stirred. And by the time I came back to my senses, I had already leaned in and kissed him. Only after a long moment did I pull away. In the midst of his shock and confusion, I softly said, Siegio, let's get married. Not because I'm grateful, just because I like you, and I want to be your wife. This time, Siegio didn't run away. He stared at me, eyes slightly red. Okay. The wedding we'd waited 3 years for. was now being prepared in full swing at the Xie residence. The date was set for the 27th of April, 3 months away. There were blessings to request, auspicious signs to choose, and wedding robes to make. Time was tight, but to Xie, it still didn't feel fast enough. He personally oversaw the wedding robe tailor's schedule. Every day, he would ask, "What day of the month is it today?" Both of us were filled with anticipation. But before the wedding day arrived, news came from the capital. Prince Huai and Shen Wenin had rebelled. The day the news reached Yunzhou, Xie had been in my courtyard, agonizing over whether to buy the wedding suites from Zhang's shop in the east of the city, or Lu's shop in the south. When the servant rushed in to report that Prince Huai and Shen Wenin had already advanced to Ganan, just 2 cities away from the capital, his face turned grim in an instant. How could fourth brother move so quickly? What about the capital? Any response? Troop deployments. He grabbed the messenger and fired 3 questions in a row. But the servant was more panicked than he was. No. Prince Huai seems to have blocked all messages coming from the capital. There are no imperial orders. It was the Grand Marshal and your uncle who sent riders ahead, asking if this was a battle worth stepping into or one to stay away from. Xie didn't answer. He just turned to look at me, long and deeply. Then suddenly he smiled. "Ollie, I was just asking. Don't worry. I'm just a demoted commoner stuck in Yunzhou. No way I'd wade into muddy waters like this. What matters now is our wedding." He said he wouldn't get involved. But I knew, whether it was him or the Grand Marshal, neither of them would sit this out. Back when Prince Huai and the current emperor fought for the throne, the capital was in chaos. The new emperor had only been on the throne for less than a year. His foundation was still shaky. Right now, he couldn't risk drawing troops from any other region. The only mobilizable force was the Grand Marshal's 2,000 idle troops stationed in Anzhou. But moving troops into the capital without an imperial edict? If it went wrong, it would be treason, a crime punishable by death. This situation was even more dire than the battle at Lingxi Pass. Xie always seemed easygoing and carefree. But just like my grandfather, his heart held the people of Great Chu. He would never let Prince Huai march into the capital unchecked. Sure enough, the next morning, he was gone. All he left behind was a letter. The first page analyzed the political situation. My father was narrow-minded, desperate to keep all power under his thumb. He couldn't tolerate anyone who might threaten him. The only wise thing he ever did was pass the throne to my 6th brother. But my 4th brother, he inherited none of the wisdom, only the cruelty and paranoia. If he takes power, both the court and the people will suffer. But my 6th brother is different. He will go down in history as a wise and noble ruler. The second page was for me. Ollie, this decision to deploy troops does carry risks. I didn't want to hide it from you. But ever since what happened to General Zhong, I've lived in regret. This time, I refuse to let grandfather and uncle face the danger alone. Stay here in the manor. Don't go anywhere. I heard the hills outside Yunzhou have apricot blossoms too. Wait for me to return safely, and we'll go together to fly paper kites among the blossoms, just like we did the day we first met. If anything happens to me, I've left you land and a house in Sichuan. Enough for you to live a life of comfort. But don't worry, I trust myself. Xie's letter felt like both a reminder and a farewell. It made my heart tremble, especially that one line from his heart. We'll fly paper kites in the apricot grove, like the day we first met. It struck me like thunder, for one reason only, because I clearly remembered. The one who caught me when I fell from my horse in the apricot grove and carried me back to the manor was Shen Wenin. The first time I met Xie, I was 11. It was at a banquet my grandfather hosted for the family of the Grand Marshal. Back then, I didn't even know he was a prince. He wasn't like he is now. He was quiet, shy, and didn't speak much. Even when the Grand Marshal asked him to greet me, he didn't say a word. Those days, I was in a foul mood. I had temporarily lost my sight from hitting my head in a fall. I only made a brief appearance at the banquet before retiring to my room. I didn't even remember what he looked like. It wasn't until the following autumn, when he came to Liangzhou under my grandfather's command, that I started hearing stories. Stories of a death-defying prince from the capital, always the first to charge in drills and battles. We didn't meet often. My most vivid memory of him was the night before my wedding to Shinwanin. He climbed over the Zhong family wall to deliver a jug of congratulatory wine outside my window. My memory couldn't be wrong. But as I clutched that letter, a wild, almost absurd thought took root in my mind. What if it was Xiejio who had saved me in the apricot grove that day? And not Shinwanin? Once the thought emerged, it surged like floodwaters, impossible to stop. My heart was unsettled. I couldn't wait. That very afternoon, I had a fast horse saddled, packed the finest wound medicine, and galloped toward the capital. Over the past 3 years, Xiejio had spared no effort finding doctors to help me heal. Though I still couldn't lift anything heavy, I could handle a specially crafted short sword with ease. I knew going wouldn't help much. I might even be a burden. But something deep down told me, if I didn't go, I would miss something important. Flustered and frantic, I lost my way several times. The closer I got to the capital, the heavier the stench of blood in the air. Blood-soaked earth and corpses scattered the roadsides. I hadn't planned to go near the battlefield. I wanted to find a place nearby first, get my bearings. But before I could, a small unit of soldiers blocked my path. Bad luck. Leading them was none other than Shun Wunen, whom I'd seen just over 2 months ago. He brought me back to a military camp outside the capital. In a hastily erected tent, he dismissed everyone else. It sounded like an explanation, but also a threat. "Ali, Prince Huai will be emperor. He's promised me, once he takes the throne, I'll get what I want. Ali, you're all I want. Everything I've done to be with you." His words were laughable. He claimed he did it for me? What a coward's excuse to justify his crimes. "Don't," I sneered. "Treason isn't something I want to be blamed for." I didn't correct his use of my name. I just stared at him. "Shun Wunen, that day in the apricot grove, when I fell from my horse, was it really you who caught me?" He didn't expect the question. For a moment he was stunned. Then he recovered, frowned, and said, "So, you finally admit you're Zhongli?" I didn't respond. He sighed, a bitter smile on his lips. "Ali, does it really matter who saved you that day?" That response was an admission. A sharp pain pricked my chest. Suddenly it throbbed. It hurt. So I had been wrong all along. I had mistaken my savior from the very beginning. All these years, I thought it was Shun Wunen who had caught me in the apricot grove. That year, my father was still alive. He had promised to take me to the apricot woods to fly paper kites. But he broke his promise 3 times. The last time, I didn't tell anyone. Out of spite, I rode to the grove alone. I thought if I went missing, he might finally set aside his duties and worry about me. But as soon as I arrived, my horse was stung by bees, panicked. I was too weak to control it. The reins slipped, and as I was thrown into the air, I truly thought I was going to die. But I didn't. In the chaos, someone caught me, rolled with me across the ground. He took the brunt of the fall. I wasn't hurt much, but I'd hit my head on a rock and blacked out. When I woke, everything was dark. I was already on his back. Though I couldn't see, I could tell he was young, about my age. He was silent the whole way. And I, terrified by my blindness, kept crying and wailing. I barely remembered anything, except that when I touched his right shoulder, it was wet, and I heard a stifled gasp of pain. He left me at the gates of the Zhong residence and disappeared. Didn't even leave his name. I thought I'd never find my rescuer. But a year later, I saw a scar on Shun Wunen's shoulder. I never questioned it again. I asked him, and he didn't deny it. I clenched the short sword hidden in my sleeve. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to kill him. But I was surrounded by enemies. I couldn't act rashly. "So, you've been lying to me all along?" Shun Wunen stepped forward, voice tinged with urgency. I wanted to deny it. At first, I really did. But every time I saw the way you looked at me, the affection and longing in your eyes. It kept reminding me that the person you truly cared about wasn't me. I didn't even realize when I started falling for you. But the more you showed you loved me, the more it hurt. Sometimes I thought, if you had someone else in your heart, would you feel this same burning frustration I felt for you? His brows furrowed, his gaze full of anguish. As for Chuyu, her timing was just too perfect. By the time I wanted to explain, it was already too late. He looked at me, his eyes filled with pain.
Like he truly loved me.
Like he was suffering from a deep, unspoken heartache. Ollie, I regret it all.
Just come back to me.
And I swear I'll treat you better than anyone ever has. Better than Siegio. I didn't believe a word. It was laughable. Chuyu's timing was coincidence? And Su Yao Yao? Shun Wonin, stop making excuses. You never loved me. You just couldn't stand the idea of not having what you once owned. It's not love. It's selfish, pathetic possessiveness. I drew the short sword from my sleeve and pointed it straight at his face. You used me as an excuse to follow Prince Huai. You've dragged innocent civilians into war and risked the safety of the entire nation. For that alone, you will never be worthy of Siegio. The short sword in my hand ultimately didn't pierce Shen Wonin's chest. I hadn't held a sword in years. I was long out of practice. Last time I injured him, it was pure luck. He hadn't expected it. This time, even though I used all my strength, I couldn't even scratch him. He turned the tables in an instant, restraining me and tying my hands and feet. Maybe it was because he saw that I truly intended to kill him. He grabbed my jaw, his face twisted in fury, his tone harsh and cruel. Ollie, everything I've done is for our future. But don't worry, since you're so concerned about Siegio, I'll be sure to bring you his severed head. Just then, the tense curtain was pulled aside. Someone stepped in. Shun Wonin turned to glance at the person and barked coldly. Watch her. Getting a response, he threw one last threat and left in a huff. Once he was gone, the person quickly stepped forward. Sister. She lowered her voice, whispering in my ear. It was Su Yao Yao, the same woman who drugged my tea 2 months ago and helped Shin Wonin take me away. In another hour, the guards outside will change shifts. There's a hidden path, I know, we can slip out then. Last time, he threatened me with my mother's life. I had no choice.
But don't worry.
This time, I'll get you out. I didn't doubt her. And she did just as she promised. An hour later, taking advantage of the guard rotation, she brought me straight past them and out of the camp. But perhaps it was just my imagination. Those guards looked at her with strange intimacy, yet addressed her with unusual reverence. That one word, madam, wasn't something anyone would use for a concubine. She must have noticed my suspicion. She spoke softly. That Miss Chu from the capital must have been a remarkable woman. This face of mine, which only bears a passing resemblance to hers, was enough to catch Shin Wonin's eye and even the Huai prince's. She smiled faintly, but those 2 short sentences made my heart drop. I couldn't believe it. Shin Wonin, he gave you to. I couldn't even bring myself to finish the sentence. Gave you to the Huai prince. As if she were nothing more than an item being traded. My chest heaved violently. I pressed down on the fury building inside me. That bastard. I should have killed him earlier. Should have risked everything and just ended him. But the one who had suffered all this, who should have been crying, raging, was Su Yao Yao. Yet her expression remained calm. She changed the subject as if none of it mattered. Shun Wonin's army stationed here is just for show. Early this morning, the Huai prince already brought 3,000 elite troops, disguised as civilians, into the capital through a secret tunnel that runs beneath the royal summer estate. All the imperial troops are stationed outside the city. Tonight, Shun Wonin will lead an attack on the gates, and the Huai prince will storm the palace from within. She paused and looked at me. Sister, I can't deliver this news myself.
But you can.
You must get this to Siegio and the Duke of Xinghua. As she spoke, she led me into a wooded area outside the camp. There, a horse was tied ready. 1 horse for 2 people. Not impossible to flee together. But something felt off. I asked instinctively, "You're not coming?" "I can't." Su Yaoyao smiled. This time, I finally saw a trace of bitterness at the corners of her lips. Shen Wunen held my mother hostage, imprisoned me for years, humiliated me for years. I have to stay here and see him die with my own eyes. Only then can I truly avenge my mother. Su Yaoyao hated Shen Wunen far more deeply than I'd imagined. As the sound of soldiers searching approached, she urged me quickly, "Sister, go. No matter what you hear, don't look back. Take the news to the capital. The lives of an entire city depend on you." She smiled again, radiant like lilacs swaying in the wind. But I clearly saw the glint of tears in her eyes, and the steel in her resolve. I wanted to bring her with me, tried to persuade her. There were other ways to take revenge. She didn't have to sacrifice herself, even wanted to stay with her. But reason told me I couldn't change her mind. She had made her choice. And she was right. This news had to reach Xiejio fast.
All right.
I will. I swung into the saddle, took one last, long look at the woman who once, in the dark of night, held my hand and said, "Sister, you can treat me like family." Then, heart heavy with dread, I spurred the horse into a gallop. Spring had already arrived, but the wind was biting cold, stinging my eyes. Behind me, I heard the clash of weapons, heard Shen Wunen's furious roar. "Su Yaoyao, you betrayed me too." Even heard Su Yaoyao's laughter, wild but free. But I didn't dare look back, didn't dare stop. Not until I stumbled, bloody and breathless, into the midst of the 20,000 Anzhou soldiers guarding the capital gates, and fell to my knees before the Duke of Jinghua. "Where's Xiejio?" "The Huai Prince is already inside the capital." The Duke didn't look surprised. It turned out most royal princes knew about that tunnel. Xiejio had already taken men last night to guard the tunnel's entrance inside the city. But unsure of the enemy's numbers, he had only brought 500 men. 500 against 3,000. The odds were terrifying. And the rest of the troops still couldn't act rashly. Because even if the Huai Prince were killed, they couldn't be sure Shen Wunen wouldn't still storm the city from outside. After some quick discussion, the Duke reluctantly dispatched 2,000 more soldiers, led by Xiejio's uncle, to reinforce him. That was already the limit. I refused to stay behind. Donning armor, I rode with them. But once we reached a high vantage point, what I saw was nothing short of a massacre. In the sea of blood and corpses, the Anzhou troops were nearly wiped out. Xiejio, drenched in blood, was locked in combat with the Huai Prince. Suddenly, from the chaos behind him, an arrow shot forward, piercing his waist. His body jerked. In the next moment, the Huai Prince's sword sank into his shoulder. The long sword was withdrawn. Xiejio collapsed to the ground. The sun was blazing overhead, but in my ears, I could swear I heard the roar of thunder. It felt like my soul had been torn from my body, drifting somewhere far above. I saw the reinforcements from Anzhou surge forward, clashing with the enemy troops in a brutal melee. I saw Xiejio's uncle ordering his men to drag him to safety. And I heard someone shout, "Seize the Huai Prince, dead or alive." It all felt so unreal, until a wave of hot wind swept past, reeking of blood. Only then did I snap back to my senses, staggering as I ran towards Xiejio. His armor had shattered. Blood still gushed from his wounds. His eyes were closed. I couldn't tell if he was dead or alive. The closer I got, the weaker my legs became. I finally collapsed beside him. "Xiejio." In that moment, I felt nothing but relief. Relief that I'd brought medicine. Relief that I'd once studied healing. I didn't dare pull out the arrow from his waist, only snap it off. But the hemostatic medicine I had worked on the many wounds covering his body. Several times, I had to force the life-saving pill into his mouth, blood coating my fingers. Only when I'd done all I could did my hands start trembling uncontrollably. "Xiejio, you can't die. We haven't gotten married yet." My voice trembled as I tried to wake him. I read your letter. You said it was you who saved me that day in the apricot grove outside Liangzhou. Why didn't you tell me? You wrote that you'd left me a way out, that if something happened I should go to Sichuan. But from the moment you saved me, from the second I opened my eyes and saw you, my only way out has been you. If you die, I won't go on living either. You can't. A voice as faint as a mosquito's whine struck me like thunder. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Siejio's eyelashes trembled. Then, slowly, he opened his eyes. Though even breathing seemed painful, he still forced a smile through trembling lips. Ollie, don't cry. I haven't married you yet. I'll survive, I swear. This time, you're the one who saved me. The war was finally won. The Huai prince was captured alive by Siejio's uncle. The massive army meant to attack the capital that night never came. By dawn, news arrived. Shen Wenin was dead. He died from poisoning, killed with a blade driven straight into his heart. No one knew where the woman who killed him, his concubine, Su Yaoyao, had gone. She vanished without a trace. Leaderless, the enemy army surrendered at sunrise. The storm had passed. Just as Siejio had said, the new emperor was different from the late one. Despite the fact that he and the Duke of Jingwa moved troops without an imperial decree, the emperor not only spared them blame, he rewarded them generously. Siejio's title of Prince Qi was restored. The duke's military command was returned, and a grand residence in the capital was bestowed for Siejio to recover. But Siejio declined. Even before his wounds had fully healed, he insisted on returning to Yinzhou. On the day we departed, the emperor came in plain clothes to see him off. At the gates, the two brothers stood talking. From afar, I saw the emperor nod and clap Siejio on the shoulder, then smile in my direction. A moment later, Siejio smiled, too.
They didn't speak long.
Back in the carriage, I couldn't help asking what they'd said. He didn't answer, just grinned mysteriously. Ollie, by the time we get back to Yinzhou, it'll be too late for the wedding. So how about we make a detour to Liangzhou? I want to bow before General Zheng's grave, and your parents, too.
He didn't need to say it.
I could guess. He'd probably ask the emperor to restore my grandfather's reputation. This trip to Liangzhou wasn't just to pay respects. He was planning something, probably hoping to surprise me. My chest ached, tight and soft all at once. Looking at Siejio across from me, his eyes nearly vanishing from the width of his smile, I couldn't bring myself to ruin it. Instead, I reached out and took his hand, smiling with him. All right, whatever you say. The end.